Welcome into the TexAgs Rewind presented by Specs. I'm Luke Evangelist. He's Matthew Dawson. We're joined by Ambry Heath at the Angry Elephant News and Social Center. Ambry, for a couple guys who were hosting the show today, how would you rate our performance compared to the regular host, David Nuno?
Okay, I was honestly shocked there wasn't more like dumb, funny comments from y'all. Wait, was that rude?
No, speak your mind.
Not dumb, just like funny, like sarcastic comments from y'all. Like y'all were very serious. I didn't know what to expect.
Super serious.
What I'm hearing is she doesn't think we're capable and have the intellectual capacity to be serious. She thinks
Which
she
is
just
wild.
sees us as like the TexAgs jesters, and we're just like,
You gave yourself the name. What was your CEO of fun or whatever?
I am the CFO of TexAgs, the Chief Fun Officer.
You want to know something? The interns, they had a conversation about who they think is the scariest person in the office. You want to tell them what the interns collectively said?
It was really just me that said it was Matthew Dawson. I was most scared of Matthew Dawson.
What is that?
Matthew,
All right,
Matthew Dawson couldn't hurt a fly. But yeah, hold on. Before we get there, Ambry, our great friend Cullen Gillaspia, who was on the show today, I'm sure he was your favorite part of the show, but can you tell us what team he scored a touchdown against in his final game at A&M? And that's okay, because the answer was NC State. And who else did y'all like on the show today?
Ryan Brauninger. I didn't really like him, but he's on the rewind, so like you have to listen to it. Ambry?
AT.
Yeah, and continuing on the acronyms, I thought OB was good as well. Make sure to check it out. You can see all four of them and more on the TexAgs Rewind. A&M and Texas made the list at number 15. And I think we both would have a hard time naming 14 rivalries more intense, more passionate than the Lone Star Showdown. But we can start at the top of that list with Michigan and Ohio State. I don't think we have any objections there, as that is the greatest college football rivalry.
I don't know if it's the greatest, but I wouldn't lose any sleep over them being ranked number one.
I would probably say same with the Iron Bowl being 2.
That's right.
That's probably 1A, 1B.
That could be, yeah.
Are there any?
And then Texas, Oklahoma. Yeah, I have to admit that's and now, well, recently, I mean, those games have been nationally relevant. You know, a lot of times, you know, that game might decide who's going to play in the for a championship, not just conference championship, but a national championship. Even though one year Texas beat Oklahoma, and still Oklahoma went and played Florida for the national championship. Army, Navy, I guess. I mean, I know it's, yeah, I'm not going to.
I mean, it's a standalone game.
The package.
Yeah, it is.
It is. It's a standalone. Not for like necessarily us, but like I would imagine. Just ask Roy May, you know, like what he thinks about that game. You know?
Yeah.
Do you agree with USC Notre Dame at 5, or do you want to put a different game in your top 5?
I don't know if I'd put you know, I would be more apt to put Georgia, Florida
Yeah.
ahead of that one.
That one's at number 12.
Let me see what
Alabama, Tennessee.
you know, I tell
The
you,
history of that game, at least, not like the last 5-10 years. I don't know what the criteria for this is. Like, is this like
I mean,
historically
if you want
all
just,
time?
there's got to be like it's got to be like I see Oklahoma and Oklahoma State on this list 25. I can't put that on there because Oklahoma wins 80% of the time,
And they also don't play anymore now.
and now they don't play anymore. I think if you don't play anymore, I see Oklahoma and Nebraska's on this list. Oklahoma and Nebraska's played like twice in 20 years.
I think this is the first year where we haven't come in with like hype that we should be the number one team in the country, and you know that it's playoffs or bust. That's kind of been the mindset the last few years with the recruiting classes that they've come through. I think that's pretty hard to do with a changing quarterback and how much that room is rotated. I think that we return, 15 starters, the entire offensive line. I've been a Marcel Reed believer since day one. I think another year in Colin Klein's offense and them starting to gel together of figuring out what Marcel does best and how to call plays best for him. I think Colin Klein got better at that as the season went on. Our defense, I think year 2 under Elko, I think the secondary is going to improve. I think our D-line, we're returning Cassius Howell, who was arguably the most productive player on the D line. I mean, he had 100 less snaps than Nick Scorton and was, second in sacks on the team. Like his production is off the charts. I think Torian York, like he's immeasurable for what he does for this team, and just in terms of what on the field, but also off the field and his leadership. It's very admirable to watch how he plays. I just think you got a lot of people returning. You got a lot of recruiting. I think it was mostly the recruiting momentum, to be honest with you. Like we can break down stats and like really get into the weeds on it, but I've just been watching Elko put on a clinic of what he's done this summer, and I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. It was last season hurt when it ended, and then we in the group chat we decided we weren't going to talk about Aggie football for about 3 to 4 months. We're going to let it die, focus on basketball, focus on baseball. Now we're in the dog days of summer, and the hype train's starting to go up. The boys are starting to drink the Kool-Aid, and I just had to get it out there.
Well, I think the obvious answer is Arch Manning. And I get, he wasn't a starter. So he just hasn't done much media availability. And I'll be curious to hear his takes on the season ahead, being the starter, this and that. I think two big picture kind of conversations that I think are going to be interesting. It's funny, I was on with Nuno's buddy Ryan Fowler yesterday, and we talked a little bit about this. Is anyone going to acknowledge that maybe the SEC has been caught a little bit in this sport of college football, at least by the top of the Big Ten? You can deny it, you can pretend it's not happening, but obviously no SEC team playing for a national championship 2 years in a row, the Big Ten winning the last two national championships. I think the top part of the Big Ten has caught up to the SEC. I still think the middle and the bottom is tougher. I think it's tougher on a week-in, week-out basis to walk into a bottom-tier SEC, facility like Tennessee losing to Arkansas, Kentucky losing or Ole Miss losing to Kentucky at home than it is in other leagues. But I still think it's a conversation. Is anyone going to acknowledge it? Because at spring meetings, Greg Sankey seemed to think it was par for the course, and I think the direct quote that he gave was, "Nobody does it like us," and I don't know that you could say that anymore. And I think the other thing that I'm just kind of curious about is, how does the media polling go? Because I look at the SEC, and I think there's about 4 or 5 teams that you can make a legitimate case for are the best team in the SEC, and I think even at the top of the league. Alabama, Georgia, Texas, all breaking in new starters. LSU, yes, Garrett Nussmeier's back, but almost an entirely new offensive line and receiving core. I just bring it up. There's a lot of questions at the top of the league, and I'm just curious, our peers, how they view this league, because I do think it's about as wide open as I can remember it.
And this has been kind of one of the biggest recruitments of this cycle so far, but he's not the only 5-star that A&M has either been in the mix for or already gotten signed.
No, and this isn't a make or break recruitment for A&M in this class. It'd be incredible to land him because you look at all of the factors that go into recruiting a guy like Lamar Brown and how often that kid does go to LSU. It's got to be 99% of the time that take the name out of it, just insert 5-star from Baton Rouge that LSU really wants. They usually do. The Tigers usually went out for that type of kid. So A&M, because of the job they've done elsewhere in the recruiting class, this isn't like some, the class could crumble or it could skyrocket it to levels unforeseen. Like A&M is amongst the best classes that they've ever had committed right now. So this would just be another cherry on top. And you mentioned it, Luke, like they are still in on a handful, I'll say a handful, close to a handful of like nationally elite targets. And, I put out some notes this morning on 3 of those. Again, this is kind of new info, so I want to encourage people to subscribe if you want the latest in this type of stuff. So I'm interested because at this stage, in recruiting, when you have a big-time decision like this, it's not often that we are on the day of and we don't have any kind of inkling which way this thing's leaning. So I'll be tuned in just like everybody else at 12:30.
And every recruitment is different. Every circumstance, every person, every family, every coach, it's all different. But it's not unprecedented for us to go into Baton Rouge and get talent. I mean, one of Texas A&M's best offensive skill players last year's hails from Baton Rouge.
Yeah, Le'Veon Moss. You look at, Edrin Cooper was coming out of Covington, Louisiana, which is closer to New Orleans. But typically when you go back and look at A&M's success rate in the state of Louisiana, it's not been a bunch of head-to-heads against LSU. Le'Veon Moss was committed to Alabama before he flipped to A&M, and LSU kind of got involved late, but not really. With Lamar Brown, it's more like a Speedy Noyle situation where A&M did win out for Speedy out of New Orleans because LSU was making a huge push from day one.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to the TexAgs Rewind. This is probably the last time you'll see me and Matthew hosting together because David's going to beat us up in the jiu-jitsu ring for not being funny enough and not being goofy enough, as Ambry put it. So if this is our last TexAgs Rewind, just know we had a blast working here at TexAgs, and thank you all who tuned in and made it special. Can you tell the people what to do?
Like, comment, subscribe, and come back tomorrow for more.